So now we are going to move to our workshop. As a reminder, I think the board knows, but rather than voting tonight on the Presumpscot bid, which came in over budget, we're going to do a workshop today that's going to look at the Presumpscot bid within the broader context of the buildings for the future projects, so we can have a fuller discussion about next steps. And then we'll schedule a subsequent board meeting to actually vote on a recommendation that will likely come from the district level advisory building committee later this month. And this usually we adjourn our meetings before we go into workshops. Tonight we're going to hold the workshop and then move to adjourn the meeting. So now we have the workshop to consider options for value engineering Presumpscot scope to conform to the lowest bid. And again, this is actually a broader conversation, a broader workshop about the status of the BFOF projects. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to the superintendent to start the discussion.
Yeah. So thank you, Madam Chair. And as the chair noted, we had our final bid from the 3-school project came in on Thursday, and it was significantly higher than what is budgeted for, and that was for Presumpscot, and significantly higher than what was budgeted for Presumpscot. So what we wanted to do today is to build some background and understanding on what options are available to the board in terms of making decisions about how to move forward. And so our presentation today is going to focus on trying to build a little bit of background, just sort of winding back to where we are with all of the projects, what was budgeted and what is currently available, and then talk about specifically what the options are around the Presumpscot project, which is the one that is at this point not already under contract. We're actually, Reich's not fully under contract, but we are wrapping up negotiations on that. So this is the only one that has not been finalized. And because we're over budget, we thought it would make sense for us to sort of look at the big picture of everything that's available and then determine where we go from there. So with that, I am going to pass it on to our Harriman team that to walk us through the presentation.
Very good. Can everyone hear me all right? Great. Well, good evening. And picking right up from where Superintendent Boitana introduced the subject here, the information we have prepared to review with you folks tonight falls into kind of really context in 3 basic areas, and then options for discussion. And that is where we've been with the history of the budget itself. And then the next piece where we'll do a deeper dive into what the alternates were for the 3 different projects that we bid this spring. We'll also look at a schedule. It's what we call a schedule of values. It's a breakdown of the bid costs for each of the schools. And then we'll present some thoughts on what options are available to the board. And so the first thing, just in terms of the budget history, this is kind of a slide that should be somewhat familiar. It's been shared back in February when we were looking at the various construction budgets and the total overall project costs, and we had at that time reconciled the different budgets that had been developed from the BFOF when Oak Point, and then through the LICEF, and then bringing it up to speed. So the numbers here of the project on the far right, the project costs are the overall costs, not just the construction, but it's all the other fees that are built into the project. Those numbers, we haven't reappropriated any funding in that column right now. So The ones we're going to kind of concentrate on are the construction budgets, and then what those construction budgets were with the bid contingency, and then we're going to compare that to the bid results. So the construction budgets are, again, as we've been carrying for some time, we've also included the actual construction number from the LICEF. And that number of $50,183,000 is our construction budget. As we've done in the with the LICEF project, we are appropriating a contingency, a part of the project budget we call the bid contingency, which is 5% of the construction budget, and that we've allocated to be available to award the project to accommodate market conditions. So 5% is typically what we would use to accommodate fluctuations in pricing. And so that number in the column that's highlighted with the red oval is our construction with bid contingency. So that's totals $51,983,000. That's kind of the overall amount in the total projects that we have allocated for construction. When we added all those up, just to point out, in February when we reviewed this, we had about $176,000 left of the total bond money of $64 million unallocated in each of the 4 different schools. So there was a very small surplus amount for all 4 projects. I'll pause for a moment as we go through this.
So if there are board members who want to ask questions as we go, use the raise your hand feature, and Mark and I can tag team a little bit. I'll call on you, but I think he'll stop the presentation for you.
And this is a workshop, so the ABC members as well. Ultimately, the plan is for whatever recommendation comes to the board comes first through the DABC, so it's important for you to consider yourselves panelists and part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. And absolutely, please, any DABC members who want to ask a question, please also just let me know.
So the next slide shows what the actual bid results were relative to the total available funds to bid. So the LICEF, we haven't carried that because we've reconciled that back when we sort of balanced through the value engineering process we did, and also shifting some funds from the total reserves of the BFOF at that time. So this time around, the first one that bid was Longfellow, and our total available funds were just over 11 million at 11,025,000. The actual bid we got in was 10,995,000, and so there was a slightly the bid was slightly under budgeted available funds by about $30,000. The next one was Reichellow, and the budgeted amount was 15,750,000. The total available funds with contingency was 16,537,500. The actual bid came in at $11,693,000. So that had a significant delta in sort of the underage of our bid of 4,844,500. So that was significantly under, and we sort of suggested we should probably wait to see the total bids before we understand what the total picture is with respect to all the BFOF projects. And then last Thursday, as everyone now knows, we had the Presumpscot Elementary School bid come in. That construction budgeted amount was $9,750,000. With the bid contingency, it was $10,237,500. And the actual bid came in at $14,589,300. So that one was over. The bid was over our budgeted amount by $4,351,800. And so, if you were to just look at the total of the actual bids, we're at $51,461,702, which is a delta from our available bid funds. We're under slightly. If you take the composite of all of those, we're under by $521,916. So the big disparity there being we were significantly under with the Reichellow bid and we were significantly over with the Presumpscot bid. I'll pause again.
Ms. Russell-Better, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, I was just wondering if even just a really brief description. I mean, I know the Presumpscot project is really different than the others and maybe more similar to Lyseth, if that's correct. But could you just share what you know? I mean, is it about materials? Like just why the bid is so, why it's such a discrepancy in the, how much over it is compared to the others?
Yeah, and we have begun to evaluate the contractor's pricing for this, but in terms of the scope of the project, a very significant portion of the work is new construction. It's above 18,000 square feet of new construction, and that is for the pre-kindergarten and kindergarten classrooms, art and music room, cafeteria, kitchen, and then the new administrative front of the building itself with vestibule. And so it's heavily weighted on new construction, even more so than the Lyseth project, because as we think back to where we evaluated what the scope of the projects, the three projects were going to be, we really concentrated on the additional classroom space to replace the portables, to provide for the secure administrative addition onto the front, having the ability to have the separate art and music rooms. And so there is a very big component of this project that is new construction. So we're really thinking about it in that way. And it happens in two areas, right in the front and the back. So there's a significant amount of site work and more so than either Longfellow or Reichellow. Reichellow has a very small amount of new construction, and most of it's just interior renovation. We're going to actually dig into a little bit of the contractor's numbers in a bit to show you our first pass, and these are hot off the press because we just got them in this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. So that would be material cost as a large.
Well, it's a combination from our conversations, and Lisa Sawins actually knows very well an estimator. She lives with one and has confirmed that what we're seeing right now is not only material costs, but there's a real challenge with labor right now. So you're starting to see labor costs being a significant component of this. And it falls within a few very targeted areas, and we'll see those in a minute.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Mr. Winch, I'm so glad you could join us tonight, and you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, just a quick question, sort of tracking back to the Lyseth numbers. I know the overall project budget for Lyseth was, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but somewhere in the $16 million range, and those obviously included a lot of different soft costs, but it also included some contingency money as well. I'm just wondering if if you feel you're close enough to the end of the Lyseth project with Hardy Pond's work finishing over the summer, if you've got a pretty good idea of where the final overall project numbers are going to fall between yourselves, Harriman, and Portland School staff, is there any money that'll be trailing from the Lyseth project?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And while we didn't prepare, we haven't prepared tonight to examine where those numbers actually are. I guess the sense that we have in terms of tracking those numbers on a monthly basis with the contractor's requisitions are that that the line items are tracking very close to the expenditures on that. The area that right now that we haven't expended on is probably the furnishing fixtures of the line item that has some degree of capacity in the budget is the furnishings and fixtures and equipment budget, which we have outfitted the library addition, and we've outfitted the admin addition, and the kindergarten is on order as well. And so there hasn't been further evaluation of expending the furniture line item, but the rest of the numbers are tracking pretty close to where our budget line items are.
So you expect the contingency to be fully swallowed?
I think we're going to be close. I think the last update we had, which I think was actually last week, and I don't have the numbers, and I'm cautious not to speak to numbers that I don't have right in front of me, but I think we were tracking pretty close to expending the construction contingency.
Yeah, we're very close to being right on that at the end, if not having a small, and I mean small surplus at the end of the project. So I don't expect there to be a lot left over in the contingency.
Okay.
Excellent question, Mr. Winch. Thank you. Are there other questions from members of the district level advisory, building committee, or the board? All right, Mark and Lisa, I think we're ready to go on.
I see one hand in the attendee column.
Oh, Ms. Bondo is an attendee now. Can we promote Ms. Bondo to a panelist? Thank you. Ms. Bondo, sorry about that. And did you have questions? And if so, please go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Just for my own comprehension and to try to see, okay, we got the actual bit, and I see we have over 4,000, just 4 million. I just want to make sure those are the final amounts that we have until the end of the project, or with the increase of the cost of construction going years to years and the labor, are we projecting something forward, or what's going to happen? At least we have an estimation if this is the last one, the actual expenditure then we're going to see from Presumpscot, or we projecting somewhere in the future, just to have an idea, because when we get the construction budget and when we see the actual bit is a lot, and I just wonder, with the cost increasing in the years to come, are we see something on the directions increase on the cost of the constructions and or the labor increase in a couple of years?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And so what the contractors, when they gave us their price this spring, they have built into their number on what they need to cover for the escalation of the future work. And so that's built into the numbers we have right now. So there wouldn't be a realized escalation in the future for these construction numbers that we have. The contractor is responsible for carrying that in their number. So I think that's what addresses that question. We have seen an escalation of cost, as we all have witnessed kind of throughout this entire process of the design and getting to the bid of the 3 school projects.
Okay, I just have a question.
Something real quick, I think, to Ms. Bondo's question, because I think that this is also part of what you're asking. There often are, when you're building something, there's new costs that you didn't expect and things along those lines. There is a project contingency associated with each of these projects. So there is a little bit of money for additional things. You decide that you want something that you didn't originally have in scope, or something came up. You found that there was a beam that needed to be replaced or something along those lines. So there is a small, I think it's 5%, folks, contingency in the projects for that purpose.
Okay. Right. So I had
Ms. Bondo, could I just add one other thing? Is we aren't authorized by Portland taxpayers to spend any more on these projects. So the $64 million is the maximum that we'll spend. So this looks ahead to all of the future costs that we could incur, and as we've been talking about, includes those contingencies and the expectation of cost increases.
Okay. So No, we already here. We've been the bonds. We had the bonds one past couple years ago, and I think we're learning from these, and just to have a way for the future. When we have a kind of renovation or couple school like that, what's the best way to do it? I mean, the bid can be on once for all the school, because if we come out to that situation, it's just something. We're late for doing something, or everything was just on time? So we have using that strategy to go school by school, and then all the cost and the construction increase just get right there on the time when we decide to go to the bid. When you compare the construction budget and where we are right now, it's been a couple of years between. So I just wonder why we come out to that place right now. So we're learning for the future. Did we wait too long time, or it was the right time to do it right now? Because otherwise, should we getting all the full school at once, or getting the way we have done right now, and we learn from these?
Very
because
difficult to sort of hindsight is always 2020.
Okay.
I think it's important, and I don't really know that it's worth trying to go through the whole history of this, but all along the board has been engaged in, in approving those decisions. So I think we can sit here and, look and say, oh, if we had bid all 4 of the projects back in 2018, maybe the costs would have been less. We didn't have the capacity to manage the 4 projects, leave alone, know what actually would have come in. If you think about it, Lyseth, turned out to be the project that was the first project, and the one that we had to use the most reserve funds for right off the bat. So I don't know that it's super productive for us to go through that. We spent a lot of time trying to get a permission from the state to be able to do the 3 projects together as a single bid in a specific format that they determined was not allowed by state law. So, we used up the better part of a year trying to pursue that line. And so, again, would it have made a difference if we had this out on the street a year ago? It would have been in the middle of the pandemic. Who knows? We would have pulled it back. So it's just hard, Ms. Bondo, to really on trying to, sort of go back, in this setting through all of the different options and choices that were made. But I just want to reiterate that the board was involved in making those choices.
Yeah. All right. That's the learning process. Thank you so much.
And Ms. Bondo, I'll also just add that all of the design work takes time. And, it takes real time. And I don't know if the Harriman team wants to speak to that at all, but, there's a huge amount of work that has gone into the design and preparation of all of the different documents to get to this point. So it's not like we've been sitting on our hands. We worked through the pandemic on this very steadily. And there were a lot of hurdles along the way, but we've done our best to work through the hurdles.
Yes, I have. Please. Yeah, I have followed up of the workshop through since I joined the board. So it's just the way we're learning for what's happening for that renovation, so we can see some adjustment for the future. That's where I was coming from. Thank you.
And I'm not sure that there are. I think every project or every set of projects is going to have its own challenges and limitations that we work through. I don't know, Mark, if you want to address the timing at all.
The only thing I'll add, and I'll try to be brief, is that we initially it was envisioned that the projects would bid one at a time, 1 per year, going forward, and the board evaluated the efficiency at doing it all at one time so that you wouldn't lose purchasing power by escalating some projects into the future. And I do believe that that's even if prices start to stabilize now, they're going to be potentially less now than they will be a year from now. So I think.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, Mark. Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bondo. Ms. Thompson, go ahead, please.
I think, Chair, between you and the superintendent, you covered most of what I was going to say. But to Ms. Bondo's point, and again, there's no sense of rehashing the past. But you're right, Ms. Bondo, had we started many years ago, which we did, we've been waiting and waiting and waiting, not only for the council, but then to get it to community. And so it was a major feat in itself, as many here know, just to get it to where it is, to get it through the council. So I don't want to place blame or anything, but, and then the referendum amount got reduced from what we needed. So we've rolled with the punches as much as possible. But, you know, even starting with Lyseth and when I served on Ocean Avenue as well, we had to do value engineering as we go along because of materials and things of that nature. So it happens. I think that, as Ms. Figdor said, that, you know, we've done the best we can. We've got the experts on it. They're trying to be as conservative as possible. And I'm happy for us to be here. Not happy that things are coming in, but I'm happy that something came in under and something over. So we're kind of in that happy place right now a little bit. And hopefully things will start to improve more. So, but that was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. And I'll just say that I see this as a real win-win. We've worked hard at getting these projects done. We have some decisions to make, but we have enough money to do all 4 projects. The schools are going to be transformed. The board got to see what Lyseth looks like now, and it's phenomenal and just exceeded all of my expectations. And so this is a good point. You know, it's really, I mean, from my standpoint, it's good news. We can do all 4 projects, even in this tough construction market, with the resources that we have that the voters approved several years ago. And we've been working hard to get to this point. There's always bumps along the road, and we've figured out how to get past them. So, and I think it's a testament to a really strong team within our within Portland Public Schools, and a really strong team within Harriman. So I think this is a big success story, and certainly seeing Lyseth completely transformed underscored that for me. Okay, so I don't see any other hands up, so let's move forward with the presentation.
So the next thing that we'll look at is the schedule values, and the first slides will just show you what the level of information that we're receiving for all 3 projects, but then we'll start to particularly look at the Presumpscot project and some of the information that we're evaluating right now. And so while I don't expect everyone to be able to kind of discern or parse through all of these numbers on the screen, they are explicit detail of where the contractor's pricing goes. And so such things as the steel costs are broken down into the steel erection, miscellaneous steel pieces that go into the building, the structural steel pieces, the miscellaneous metals and materials. And so again, it's a breakdown. This one has a particularly detailed breakdown for Longfellow because they've had time to really evaluate the various pieces. What it does do is it allows us to compare against where we estimated the project. Longfellow was very close to the construction budget, and so we haven't done a deep dive into all of these numbers and where they've stacked up against the estimate. So, like I said, this is what ultimately ends up with the bottom line number that we see here on this page of 10,995,784, which is what we had established earlier, but it's all the different components that are broken down that go into the building. The next one is the Reichellow, which is more consolidated pricing information. this is still somewhat preliminary because they still are working on finalizing how all the numbers get divided. But it does give us a sense of what the costs are. And so a couple that I'll point out on this one. One of them is the mechanical and plumbing, which was $3.2 million for Reiche, and that's again, Reiche is a larger school than Presumpscot, and so just kind of giving a sense of the mechanical systems and the work that we're doing at Reiche, and the other ones that right now we're seeing that are the biggest numbers in the project are finishes, and when we say finishes, it includes things like the carpet and the paint and the ceilings, but more costly in that number is all the wall studs, the steel studs and the drywall that goes into building all the walls. And so with Reiche, that's a lot of our work is really building all those individual classrooms that we don't, that we're not, that currently aren't there. And so that's why that's a very large number there. But the other ones for Reiche are very small. If we look at metals, this metals number here is $389,000. That's because we have a very, very small addition onto Reiche, and so the steel costs that we've heard about, and maybe you've read about, steel costs just escalating through the roof and being very expensive. Those didn't impact the Reiche school that much with the structural steel. We do see some of it in the steel studs, but those are all light gauge steel, and it doesn't have the same impact that it does on a project that has a large amount of structural steel. So the next one is the one we've been analyzing today, and that is because we just received those Presumpscot.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you to maybe we can ask a couple questions about the details on Longfellow and Reiche?
Absolutely. I'll pause.
I had a question, which is just looking at Reiche when where, I don't have your documents in front of us in terms of the cost estimation. So I'm wondering where we see the variance between this, this schedule of values. I understand it's preliminary, and the cost estimate, the work from the cost estimator.
Yeah. So thank you, Emily. So the big areas that that we saw as a reduction are actually in this, which is our Division 9 is called, but it's the finishes. That area right there. Also in the fire suppression, which is the sprinkler system, came in lower than what we had estimated. Electrical came in pretty close, slightly over what the estimate was, but pretty darn close to what was estimated. Demolition, I think we had more in our demolition number than what the Reiche bid actually came in at, and moisture and thermal, which is our Division 7, because again it's a small area. We had estimated a bit more because it's hard to estimate when it's a very small amount. The typical cost per square foot numbers that we would expect to see are low. We oftentimes are escalating them to a higher value because you don't have the efficiency of spreading it over a larger construction. So that came in lower than what we had estimated as well. So in general, the finishes is probably the area that we saw the most savings from what we thought that it was going to cost on the Reiche project.
And how do you understand that?
I think the impact to steel was felt less, and we had more competition for Reiche. So we had a fairly good competition at the sub level, and not at the general contractor with the same number of bidders we had fewer for Reiche than we did for Presumpscot, but at the sub level we had very good competition for the Reiche school.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, Mark, and I know that we had asked you to bring this, and when can we get a side-by-side of what was estimated and what came in for both the Reiche project. So all those numbers that you just described now, what was our what was estimated for electrical, fire, et cetera. Get that side by side. And then also, obviously, and I know that this is soon because we just got the bid, but, what's the, I guess what I'm getting at is that there is a very significant discrepancy between what was estimated for the Reiche project and what the bids came in, and what was estimated for the Presumpscot project and the bids came in. And so I think, from my perspective, in terms of informing the, maybe even to Ms. Bondo's question, what are the lessons here for us from that? And I think also helpful to the DABC as they engage in their work.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Bottana. What we can do is we'll send out an updated presentation. In fact, because we're even adding information that we received this afternoon that will show you that wasn't in your packet. And so we'll include the comparison of Reiche, because that was one we didn't concentrate on as we prepared for tonight's presentation. So we'll include that comparison.
Great, thank you. I think we can move ahead.
Okay, great. And our apologies, we were kind of zeroing in on Presumpscot on the brain here. But we'll get that information for you. In talking to the, well, in evaluating, so these numbers just came in. It was the holiday weekend, and the contractor, we asked them Thursday to get us the information, and they were off Friday. So they did produce these numbers for us to review. We just got them in today. We started looking at them relative to our estimate. There were 5 areas that really, really told the story of where this comparison was. And that is in the Division 5, which is the steel, the structural steel number. The Division 9, which is the finishes, which included the drywall, the wallboard and the studs, the metal studs to build the walls. The plumbing and HVAC, which, as I pointed out in the other project, that's where you start to really see a lot of the costs in terms of the real big numbers that make up a bid. Electrical number, and then site work, the digging of the foundations and the work to prepare for the additions. And so if we look at the estimated value, steel is our first one that we looked at, and it's significantly different than the delta in the Division 5 is 524,000 of which the estimate was 665,000. The next one is the Division 9, and that one is a little bit closer. So the estimate was 1.4 million. The bid came in at 1.8 million for all the items that go under Division 9, and so about a $300,000 difference there. Then we get to HVAC and the plumbing. That's the systems, the equipment that heats and cools and ventilates the building itself. And here's one that we're struggling mightily to understand, and that's because the estimate was 1.7 million. The bid came in at 3.8 million, so almost $2.1 million difference in the HVAC number. That right there, the $2 million on a single line item is one that we're saying we need to understand further how that bid came in as high as it did. And similarly, the electrical was estimated at 1.1 million and came in at 1.9 million. So a little over $800,000 difference. And then the site work is incorrect. I'm looking at this, and this will be corrected. It's not 748,000. That was a mistake from an earlier number. The estimate was $916,000. The bid was 1.18 million. So there's only about a $250,000 difference on that one. So I apologize for this slide is not correct, and we'll correct that. So, but if you were to add up the $250,000 or so on site, and the other four numbers are accurately identified, it accounts for about $4 million difference from the estimated value for those 5 lines to what the bid results were. That 4 million represents most of the delta between the bid amount and the estimated amount.
Ms. Russell.
Also, can I just quickly just interject, because I don't think that we mentioned this in the introduction, and I meant to do that. That the 3 bids for Presumpscot were all in the neighborhood, so it wasn't like we saw and this obviously was the lowest bid, but the others were not that far off. So,
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Better go ahead with your question, please.
Oh, you don't want to go, Chair? You're letting me go?
Go ahead. I'll follow up.
Thanks. Mark, I know you said that, especially that HVAC and plumbing part, you wanted to get more information. Does that mean you don't have more about like whether it's the labor piece versus materials? Do you not have that information yet? Or just haven't? I'm just curious.
Yeah, correct. We don't have that. They haven't given us the breakdown beyond these numbers at this point in time. So we will engage with the contractor. In fact, we've got a scheduled call with them tomorrow to start to dig in further to understand where this, where they are so far off. Why can we see the subcontractor numbers that they received so that we can have a better sense of what it is. There's nothing that requires the contractors to provide that information to us in their bid form, but they're being extremely cooperative and wanting very much to help in understanding what the costs are.
Okay, and then just another quick follow-up. In your professional experience, because all those numbers are big, but then you see the 2 million, is that really out of the norm of what you would see? That's like not normal to see that, I would imagine.
Correct. And we've seen spikes in the past, particularly when the bidding climate gets sort of really busy and there's labor shortages in some of the trades. And so I think that's reflected in the mechanical, the HVAC and plumbing number, and in the electrical, that there's a significant component of that that's probably attributable to some increase in labor costs or really tight labor costs. The steel number, we think, is really very much directly attributed to there's two things. One, the commodity cost of steel has risen significantly. And the second thing is that most of the steel suppliers are just booked out. And so there may be a premium to get it within the prescribed construction period.
I see. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. And I'll just remind everyone that for the Lyseth project, Hardy Pond was generous with us to share those subcontractor bids. And that was very helpful, I know, to the district level building advisory committee and to the board as we figured out how to move forward with that project. So it would be great if we'd see that from the other contractors as well. Mr. Winch, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, I'm just curious, looking at plumbing and HVAC number and the electrical number, it is a huge delta on both of those. And looking at the 3 bid numbers, the difference between the low bid and the high bid is $1 million. So, it is pretty tight pricing with Blaine Casey in the middle. And I wonder if they were all getting the best HVAC number they could get, and that's not the optimal. And same with electrical, it's just not the best option that might have been otherwise available to them because they didn't get other bidders. And sort of hearkening back to the events that panned out with Lyseth, where you found another bidder, so to speak, to bid the electrical work, and that drove down the cost there by a significant amount, which was a huge component of making Lyseth achievable. I'm just wondering if you see in those two subtrades that type of a situation here where you're just not getting the best available bidders to bid the work.
Yeah, and Lisa and I were talking about this a little bit earlier too. The idea that right now, the conversation that we had with the contractor said that she received 2 bids per trade, which suggests that if you've got some level of competition, that should be enough to drive a real number. That if someone really wants it, they'll price it as low as they can to get the job. However, and her comment was also that they were surprised because they've been bidding things lately and not even getting a contractor to bid on a trade. And so that's been a real challenge right now. There's a shortage of folks right now that are out there submitting pricing because they're very, very busy. And so there's not as much need for their work. So that's one thing. This project, I think, Lisa, your term was that it's a big project, right? I think it's the terminology, and that means that it attracted bidders that probably would have passed it up had it been a smaller project. We're seeing people just not even bid on smaller work right now. So this was large enough that it made it worth someone to estimate and put a price in. I suspect, Matt, that we're going to find out with the contractor that it was probably a similar bid pool for all the contractors that bid, that probably had the same contractors, mechanical and electrical, that bid to all 3 general contractors. And I don't know yet to say it's, the number is similar to Lyseth, where we're able to go out and find someone willing to do it for less. We just haven't had that degree of study yet. Lisa, do you have anything else you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I'll just comment on sort of what we're seeing right now with the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. I mean, there's like the steel, we're seeing an increase in copper. And so that exists in both of those. We're also seeing an increase in the equipment for both of those. And then we're also just seeing some fear from contractors, especially subcontractors, looking at, they don't know what's going to happen with some of the pricing on some of those commodities, as well as the materials, and if they can get the labor there to do it when they've agreed to do it. And so we're seeing even higher numbers come in. These do still seem out of whack, I guess I'll say, given all of that, which is why we want to dig in further, especially with the Division 22, 23, and 26, the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, just to understand, is this what they're seeing from the vendors, or is there something off that will give us a better gauge as to what we're dealing with?
Yeah, I guess part of my reason for asking is it kind of informs decisions that ultimately your recommendations you're going to ask for at some point here. I don't feel comfortable without you understanding these numbers enough to really personally want to support any type of a recommendation tonight without knowing more. But I don't disagree with you all that prices are in a trajectory where they're moving up, not down. But this is certainly 2 areas of a pretty strange anomaly where it makes one wonder if it's, time wouldn't have a material effect on this in a positive way, where other sub numbers might go up, but where this one might drop enough that it's a significant impact to the overall project.
Yeah, I think, Matt, we're hoping to understand further after talking to the contractor, just to dig in, be able to share any more information we possibly can about, their impression of the numbers as well, because they see numbers from subcontractors a lot. And so between the contractor and Harriman, we should be able to get you some more sense of an understanding of what the numbers really are telling us.
Thank you, Mr. Winch. I have a follow-up question as well, which is just trying to understand the finishes line item here on Presumpscot, which we talked about on the Reiki project was it sounds like one of the lead, we don't have this comparison yet, but it sounds like was one of the leading areas in which we saw the variance, but in that case, a reduction. So how can we understand, and these bids were, 3 to 4 weeks apart. So how can we understand the different outcomes that we're seeing here?
Yeah, Emily, and part of the advantage actually we have of working with the contractor to understand the values is they bid both projects. And so I think they can also help us understand what they saw on Reiki versus what they saw on Presumpscot too. And so I think with that line of questioning to them, I think we'll have a better sense as well of why we were able to see the difference at Reiki very different than the outcome at the difference at Presumpscot.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Winch, I see your hand is still up. Did you have another question? No. Okay. All right. Mark and Lisa, I think we're good to continue.
One of the things, again, I think that was asked of us to sort of inform the board as well was just the idea that in addition to these base scope of the work that we've included in the bid pricing that has been received, there were still a series of alternates that were considered as part of these bids that we had scoped, that I think everyone's familiar now with the alternates that we had developed a listing with the building level advisory committee and then the district advisory building committee, and then also shared with you folks what those were. Some of those alternates got incorporated there we'll sort of talk about one in particular in a minute here, but the list, sometimes the mechanical items were overlap, and so the mechanical scope was either controls or new equipment, and it turned out that new equipment included controls, so we didn't need to have two separate alternates for that. So the alternates that we bid with the Longfellow were those enhanced areas within the classroom corridors, such that we had seen at Lyseth, where it sort of provides a space for breakout. And so the classroom nodes were one item that we had as an alternate. It replaced the interior doors that weren't going to be new doors as part of the project. Was another alternate that we had. Unit ventilators were the mechanical ventilation units in the classrooms. Replace them throughout the building where we weren't putting new ones in. Replace existing exhaust fans, and those are another mechanical item associated with bringing exhausting air and bringing in fresh air. And then we had the masonry repair of the exterior of Longfellow, as well as the big one, the kitchen and cafeteria addition at $2.5 million. So that's those were the list of alternates that the contract. These are real bid prices from the contractor that were submitted. So we had been working with estimates before. Now we have real pricing. So that was the alternate list from Longfellow. The Reiki one, we had some interior finish upgrades at each of we had these collaborative and small group rooms. We also had a pre-K room, additional pre-K room. We had a learning courtyard, which was outside in a landscaped area where the entrance used to be. We had a warming kitchen renovation, and that was to create an actual kitchen in an area next to the cafeteria. We had replaced the hydronic piping in the building, in the classroom side of the building. And then we had the entrance trellis. What you don't see here, there were some acoustic treatment upgrades to the brickwork. We were able to actually incorporate a number of improvements to that in the base bid. So that's not included as an alternate. So that's one that I know we've talked about in the past. But so these numbers, again, give us real bid numbers that Hardy Pond included in their bid.
Mark, just a quick question on the Reiki acoustic treatments in the brickwork. Was a full scope of those acoustic treatments included, or a portion of it? I just wasn't clear from your comment. It's incredible news, but I just want to make sure that we're talking about really making that space, which is where Reiki kids eat lunch pre-pandemic, making that space a usable space for kids.
Yeah, I don't know if Lisa wants to speak a little bit. She was sort of in on the details of that. In fact, working a lot with acoustics in Reiki.
Yeah, so a good portion of those were incorporated, and what happened was the existing ceiling tiles that are in there got impacted to the point where they all had to be replaced. So they would have a higher absorption than what was there. So that's the biggest impact to that space as part of the base bid.
Great, thank you. And I'll just clarify, Mark said it when he spoke about the alternates, but for Reiki, it's not an alternate location, but it's an additional pre-K classroom.
Yep.
Right, correct.
There's just one now in the as planned for the school.
So the last list is the Presumpscot Alternates that just came in Thursday. We had new unit ventilators that were not already to be placed as new, and that's pretty much throughout the existing building. We had replaced interior doors that weren't going to be replaced as part of the project, renovate the hallways, and so that was one where at Lyseth we were able to go through and really renovate the main hallways in the school. And there's less work in reconfiguring spaces in Presumpscot than there was at Lyseth, but this one would have put new finishes in all the corridors. And then the classroom nodes, as we called them, again, were another item that we included as an alternate. So I'll pause for a second here. If there's any questions, but otherwise we'll move to the next subject. So now we're sort of started to look at, well, what are the potential options that the board has in looking at the bid for Presumpscot. First one, the consideration was you could shift funds from presumably the Reiki project to the Presumpscot project to cover the construction delta. So that's one consideration. That's and so as we have seen in the first part of the presentation, there would be enough to cover the construction cost in doing so. The second is we could look at doing reductions to Presumpscot. So how do we take and reduce the scope by either removing a degree of what's there, or actually removing pieces of the work, actual larger new parts of the building that would result in savings. And then the third option is to not proceed at this time with this bid, which means that you could do you could delay and send it out to bid later, or some other function, but is you don't have to accept this bid. You could decide to table it and either do redesign or rebid the exact same scope at another point in time. So those are sort of the three ones. We don't know if there's additional considerations that may come out of our conversation with the contractor. Again, we were, as Mr. Winch pointed out, at Lyseth, through the conversations, we identified that there was another electrical contractor willing to submit a price to that same contractor, to the general contractor, the low general contractor, willing to do the price of the work for less. That resulted in significant savings. We don't know if that's even a case right now or an option, but there may be something that comes out of our conversations with the contractor that might be in addition to these three. I think our next slide suggests some of the things that we've already looked at as potential value engineering.
You move on to that. Just a question on that. What's the timeline for doing that deeper look at the Presumpscot subs?
So we are, as we said earlier, we're going to meet with the contractor tomorrow. They are keenly aware of how much the 5 areas that we identified are seemingly out of sorts for the pricing, and so we hope to be able to go through the motions with them. We're hoping that by Friday that we can have some substantial something substantial to report back to all of you.
Thanks, Mark. My hand's up as well, and I'll just say briefly before we go on that I don't see it as an option, or I'll say it is not an option to not proceed with the Presumpscot project. The good news is that we have money to do all 4 schools, and what we're trying to figure out now is the details. So I see it included in the slide. It isn't an option. The voters told us to do all 4 schools. That's the money. That's the money that we have is to renovate all 4 schools. And the good news is, again, with the full project budget, we have the resources to do it. And now, in terms of these options, as we'll get to, we need more information in order to figure out the details. And I see Mr. Post has his hand up, so go ahead, Brad.
Good evening, everyone. So just a question is on the value engineering. Mark, does your team see anything like that's a good option, or areas that could be value engineered, not lessening the quality of the design, but sometimes you have options. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brad, what we did in evaluating this list is we actually went back to some of the items that were considered when we went through the value engineering exercise for the Lyseth School. I'm not sure that we recommend anything on this list, but what we try to do is at least generate ideas that came forward during that time. One of the things that if in order to close a gap of $4 million, 4.3 million, it's more than simply just saying, okay, we're going to take a lighter grade of carpet or different change out of floor tile. That really doesn't come close to trying to realize savings or reductions, value engineering reductions of scope to the magnitude of what we're considering. So you really have to look at what would square foot reductions look like. And again, we're not promoting any of these, but we're just saying that here's our estimation of what you might see from a contractor for savings. You also have to realize contractors aren't going to give you the competitive price in value when you go through this exercise. So that's something to consider as well. And so we're being slightly conservative in these numbers, but to give you an order of magnitude of what we think the savings that they might come back and say, if we were to remove the kitchen and cafeteria, similar to what we had as an alternate price at Longfellow. And right now we're showing this as a 1.25 million savings. And again, that needs to be confirmed with the contractor. If you recall, the cost for the cafeteria and kitchen at Longfellow was over 2 million. But again, we're being sensitive to what realistically the contractor might give us back on that. So it may be higher than this, but until we have that conversation with the contractor, we want to be on the cautious side. The next one, and so the comment on that is, if we did that, it would still function as it does today in terms of the food delivery and using the cafegimatorium as that space that you use for both PE and use for the cafeteria. The next one was if we didn't do the whole front entrance addition, and it would have to function like it does today. We estimated that to be about $750,000. And again, that likely is something that we could, we might be on the low side there, but without the contractor weighing in, we don't really have a sense of understanding what the full value of that might be. But what we used are construction square foot numbers to arrive at these. The next one was remove art or music. So we have a new art and music room on the addition. And if we did just one room that they would have to share like they do now, they share an art and music room, that takes out about 1,000 square feet, which would be about $200,000. One thing we could do is reduce the amount of brick on the addition. So we could use a lesser cost material on the addition. And that has potentials of reducing cost, but also potentially less durable than the brick. Brick tends to wear well over the course of the life of building. The next thing is an exterior material that we are using. It's like the lighter material that we use at the front of the Lyseth School project. It's a high strength concrete panel, and we could change that to like a metal panel, and perhaps less durable, but it would still be fine. But that's estimated at $16,000. We have a skylight when you come into the lobby. That is similar to what we did at Lyseth School. We could eliminate the cost of that skylight. We have rubber flooring in the hallway that we, similar to what we did at Lyseth, which is a little softer and quieter and easy and much longer wearing than the tile that we typically use. And that could be some savings there. There's a wood ceiling system that we used in one portion of the building that provides warmth and some acoustic absorption. And so that's an area that potentially could be reduced. We have on the walls in some of the classrooms and instruction spaces, we have full writing surface called wall talker. And so it just makes the space or the wall that much more conducive for using as a whiteboard for young students and for adults. We could reduce the amount of that and go to standard whiteboards. We could reduce the amount of Forbo, which is a tack surface product, similarly. And we could also, what we did at Lyseth was we eliminated locks from the casework, which was a very small amount, but it was an item that we considered, and I think we took that line item. So if you add all those up, it right now totals over $2 million in reductions, but those would be some severe reductions if we were to take all of those.
Thank you, Mark. I see that we have some hands up. And I just want to reiterate that these are just options that Harriman is presenting, having looked at the how over budget we are in this project. Ms. Bondo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Mark, thank you. By listening to you with the value engineering options here, and the way I look at it is that when I see everything, then we try to save here is like we are redesigning the school in different ways than you used to be the initial designer here. And then I don't know. I have a sense that we are losing, look at the options, we are losing the value of what we want to give opportunities, more equitable opportunities for the future of our education system. So saving is fine, but I think what we want to achieve is that it's mostly moving for the new education area than giving more opportunities for students to be able to thrive. And coming to you as an expert, what you see, those are three areas of options then we have. Moving with the bid that we have now, going to the value engineering option, or just waiting to have another bid. As your expert, what kind of recommendation or advice you can just bring in here? I already know what I want to see happening, but I just want to hear something from you, because the value engineering option is totally out of my mind, because it's just reducing what we've been putting forward for our students, so to have a better future in the education space. So what's your different thoughts about this?
I'll certainly share my feelings. I know Lisa will share her feelings too on this. And again, these are just try to be as objective in this evaluation, because this is really your decision to make, and we're here to help provide information for you to make those decisions. But I think that the challenge in value engineering is that you receive less value for your dollar than you really sacrifice that purchase power with value engineering. So that's a consideration that you really have to think long and hard about what areas you decide to give up. I think to your point, we worked really hard at the very beginning to understand. I think this is the scheme that we've designed to is the classroom scheme that folks were very deliberate in thinking about how they were distributing resources to accomplish some level of equity across all the schools, and that's a really difficult term. But so I think that's what the designs have been carried out to do. And when you take some of these reductions that we were seeing on this list, I think it goes back to really question: are you still accomplishing the goals that were established for the project? But that's on that one. With respect to
something real quick, Mark, as well. So I just, I know you mentioned this earlier, but in these three options that you outlined, there's a sort of a pre-step that isn't shown here, which is the value engineering that you're doing. And it's not value engineering, whatever it is that you're doing now with the contractor to determine whether or not there are potential ways to get some of these costs down in the current design. Right, so that I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost, because this moves directly to either A, B, or C without consideration for the intermediate step that still is happening.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Bontana. I think that's absolutely correct. We don't know what might come out of that conversation, and it might be that there's some other options that were not on the table here, and so I think that's an excellent point. And then I'll just follow up very quickly with. The decision to move money is simply one that you folks will have to make, and shifting money from one project budget to another. The one to not proceed or to rebid the project, the question is whether or not you're going to see any significant change in the bid climate moving forward. Right now, we have no crystal ball to understand what it's going to be, but we're seeing still significant amount of work in the market, and we don't see that changing anytime soon.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair.
On that one too, because I do think that, when I look at what you have laid out as potential areas for value engineering, and I think this is what Ms. Bondo was saying, it changes the character of what it is that, that the project intended to do altogether.
Exactly.
So it's not the same project. And so I guess I would say that if we're in that situation where we need to operate within budget, that it may make more sense to redesign and rebid as opposed to, just go with the same thing again to see if we get a better deal, right? That it would be, sitting down and looking at what are the absolutely, foundational things that we want to be able to do with the, $10 million that we have to spend on it.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo.
Thank you.
Ms. Russell-Better.
Thank you, Chair. I just felt the need to share my extreme discomfort with looking at any of those items on the, and I understand this is a process we're going through. I only can see those last few, which would save no money, but I feel like all of those items are absolute basic necessities for this project, and I can't see how, you know, how this project would be in any way an equal project if we were to remove those. And I guess the thought of redesigning the plan I'm really uncomfortable with that idea. And I guess I'm just a little unclear. I'm just thinking process-wise for me, when we're looking at the list of alternates for the Reichellow and Longfellow projects, am I right in that's a step for the DABC to be looking at those? I guess to me, I feel like the decision about this seems to need to come. I mean, if there are alternates for those projects that we need to discuss, it seems like that's a separate issue. But I guess I just want to say to the board and the DABC that I feel really uncomfortable about any of these, us even really entertaining these. And I just need to advocate for the Presumpscot community strongly that that this wouldn't feel like a just and equitable process, which I think our whole process of passing the school bond for the 4 projects to be done has gone in that manner. So I would expect it to continue with our decision making at this point. So if there's any clarification about the piece about the alternates and kind of how that would be discussed, that would be helpful for me.
So what we wanted to do, the purpose of today was to build background knowledge. And so making sure that everybody understood that there were things in all 3 projects that were not built into the specifications that were sent out because, the building level advisor committees determined this is the scope of what we want to be able to put out there. And when we estimated the costs, we found that we couldn't do all of the things that we wanted to do. And so some of those things moved to the alternate list. So we wanted to make sure that that the full board and that the ABC was, and the community as well, was brought up to speed on all of the things that were not in the designs that were, that were put out for bid. And, and I think, specifically when you look at Longfellow, right, we removed from Longfellow in the specification process, we removed the cafeteria and kitchen addition because we just weren't going to be able to pay for it. And so I think it's important for all of that to be visible, transparent to the DABC and the board members. The next step in the process after this intermediate step that we've discussed is, and that intermediate step being, are there, reductions in the costs associated with the bid that we just got, that can be achieved by virtue of, a new sub or something along those lines, is for the DABC to look at the various options, look at the full scope of the budget, weigh and balance the, all of the choices that are sitting out there that have not been funded, including the overage cost for Presumpscot. So we didn't want to assume that it was, oh, great, we had, $4.5 million saved from Reichellow. We are $4 million over at Presumpscot. Let's just move that money. That is, we wanted to honor the process that has been established, which is to have the DABC make recommendations to the school board, and then, for the school board to weigh in. And, obviously we heard from you that you would be uncomfortable with, with removing any of those things if that were a recommendation. And so that would be obviously, your vote. But, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that that's the process that we're trying to follow.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better and Mr. Superintendent. I had my hand up and will just say that I fully agree with Ms. Russell-Better. I do not see us value engineering the Presumpscot project into a wholly different project, and nor do I see us redesigning the project. The moment is now, and we're going to get all 4 schools renovated, and we're not going to continue to kick the can down the road. We've done that. We know what that's like, and the opportunity is right now to get these projects, to get the projects done. And I also just want to mention, I appreciate the conversation about, okay, well, there are parts of the projects that were presented as alternates. I do want to make sure that the board knows that the Longfellow, the cafeteria and warming and kitchen were not included, in part because of the priorities that the building level advisory committee and for Longfellow and the DABC chose for that school. They chose to focus on different aspects of the school, and so that the cafeteria and kitchen became an alternate. So I just want to make sure that we're honoring the process such that, when we're looking at the cafeteria and kitchen for Presumpscot, that's a core part of this project. As is, of course, the front entrance and the new space for ELL and guidance and all of that. So I appreciate the conversation. It's important to have all the different pieces of the puzzle on the table, and to bring us back to the fact that bottom line, we have the money to do these projects, and now we just have to figure out the details. I am hopeful that Harriman is able to work with the contractor to figure out why there is such variance in some of the line items, and to see if there are additional subcontractors who might be able to bid and on those line items and reduce the cost in that way. But regardless, we have the money to do these projects. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I think that having the conversation may seem confusing and pointless, but I appreciate the transparency and putting it out there. I don't think there is support. I don't think we can assume that there would or wouldn't be support one way or the other. I'm gauging that we wouldn't do that. I know I wouldn't support any kind of value engineering for Presumpscot either, but I think that we should just let the process happen. And to Ms. Russell-Better's point, let the DABC also fully be aware of this, and then follow our process as we have for the others. The money's there. It seems like a win-win to move the money over, but I just want us to make sure that we do follow. So I appreciate the superintendent and Harriman putting this forth just so that we can see it. The public is aware. It's transparent. So I think it's the right move to just show this information while it seems kind of fruitless and pointless because we know probably pretty much the way we're going to go. I just think transparency's sake. So I appreciate it. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Winch.
I have several concerns. One relates around transparency. Somebody's forwarded me a letter from the superintendent that's basically saying that this project at Presumpscot at $13 million is going forward, stated today. But here we are having a discussion about the future of Presumpscot, and I support it going forward. But I'm feeling incredibly conflicted right now because we're having this conversation about whether or not we've got accurate bids and 3 options that Harriman has presented, but then there's this letter from the superintendent that's now in the public square that's really suggesting that decision's already been made. So I'm, I guess, incredibly confused right now as to what I've just spent the last 2 hours sitting through.
Could you send me that letter, Matthew?
Matthew, as a member of the Reiki community, I received one about the Reiki project as well today. And so it seems like those letters might have gone out prematurely.
And whatever letter it is, I would request that be sent out to the DABC and the BLACs for those buildings, because if people are already receiving this, it sounds like it's rather confusing, and I have no idea, being co-chair of DABC, what you're talking about.
Just to bring people up to speed, they're letters informing the school communities about the work that's going to be done. And they provide some of the context about the project and a little bit about for Reiki, about some of the changes that will be made to the building and the timeline.
I know what letter that is now, and yes, it is premature for that letter to go out on Presumpscot, given this conversation that we're having. So that's my mistake.
Would you send us all the letter that was?
Yeah, we sent letters to all 3 of the school communities. Just, this is something that Chair Figdor and I had discussed, sending out to each of the school communities, but given, I just did not think through the fact that Presumpscot is on hold, given the conversation that we're having today. So my apologies for that.
Okay, but I guess I'm going to ask in the future that the whole board be informed before something like this goes out, at least the DABC, because I feel a little blindsided here by this. And then whether it's just a communication or what have you, I'd still like to see copies of it sent out to the full board. Thank you.
Ms. Russell-Better.
Mr. Winch, you weren't waiting? Was your hand still up? Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it was just a mistake in timing, which I can respect. I just want to put out there that I do feel like, particularly from Scott community, there's a lot of sensitivity about our building, and I am a little concerned that people are going to be further concerned and confused, knowing that this meeting's discussion. If there's any other communication that can go out, even just to specifically Presumpscot community, I'd be happy to talk to Angie about that. But I would just like to kind of make sure people understand where we're at. That would be my question.
I just want to reiterate, because I hear the concern in Ms. Russell-Better's voice that, we're doing our due diligence as the board, and the DABC will take this on next week. But we have the same commitment to the Presumpscot project and to getting it done. But with the bid coming in so much over budget, we need to dig in and see where things where things were off, and try to understand that. And then we do, in this case, have the money, so we can move the money over, but we are just doing our due diligence to dig into the details and fully understand the situation.
Yeah, I just have one other comment. I think I have the confidence, and I think most people would understand that the board and the district advisory committee has the interest of Presumpscot community, but I just wanted to, share historically the community over time feeling worry about being left off of these projects, so I just think just being sensitive to that, whatever, very clear communication can be made. I think that's just my concern is people worrying and reaching out to me about this and wondering, what does this mean? You're talking about value engineering. So I guess I understand it for the due diligence process, but for people who aren't following it so closely and see or hear this, I just would be concerned about the message that went out and then what people may misunderstand about what that means. So we can talk about it. Maybe just I can figure out through the Presumpscot community if there may be a way to, but I just wanted to flag that's my concern, that people aren't well informed. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Mark and Lisa, do we want to wrap it up there, or is there more that you wanted to present to us?
I think that's what we had prepared as this initial informational context of the bid and kind of where we're at. I think what we'll do is continue to update information as we receive it with from our conversations with the contractor. Make sure you all get that. We'll update this presentation tonight to correct a few of those items that we identified and get this back out to everyone as a follow-up to today's meeting.
Thank you so much. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to say anything as we bring the workshop to a close?
No, I mean, obviously, I feel terrible about what we sent out, although I know that that's, that the spirit of this group is to move the money over for Presumpscot, but just that does not excuse the fact that we went ahead and sent out that letter. And so I apologize for that because it does send a conflicting message. We're having a conversation about, potentially, redesigning the project. And that makes it sound like we've already determined to move forward and we should not have done that. So I apologize for that. We will, after Friday, when we have a better sense of what the potential savings are, we will convene the DABC to begin the process of making decisions about it.
Mr. Post?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank all of you. This is an amazing group of people. And Superintendent, we know your heart, and you do an amazing job, and everyone is human here. I know there's no malintent. I think everyone's excited about this process. It's a complicated process, so there's bound to be a faux pas here or there, but just an encouraging word and trying to be uplifting. And I feel a lot of gratitude towards all of you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Post. And I'll just come back to again that we are in a really incredible place with these projects, that we have all the bids in and we have the money to renovate all 4 schools, and we're going to renovate all 4 schools. So it's a good news. It was very tenuous for a while in this market. We didn't know where we would end up. And the bottom line is that we have the money to renovate these schools, and it's going to transform the schools. And as we've seen at LISA so far. So there's, we have details to resolve over the next few weeks. As the superintendent said, we'll try to convene a district level advisory committee meeting next week, assuming we get more that Harriman is able to get more information from the contractor. And then after that, after the DABC meets and is able to make a recommendation, we'll convene. So that means another special meeting in July to vote on the recommendation from the DABC. So I think that concludes this workshop, and we are ready to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Thompson, seconded by Ms. Russell-Better. All in favor, just with a show of hands. It is unanimous, and we are adjourned at 8:18 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this special meeting, and I hope you have a good night.